The black waitress helps a drunk billionaire get home. 1 week later, she becomes the Welcome to Dusk Tales. Let's uncover what really happened. The scent of cheap coffee and stale grease was etched into Nia's skin, a permanent reminder of her existence at the bottom rung of the city's indifferent ladder. For 5 years, she had navigated the sticky linoleum floors of Henderson's Diner, a place where dreams went to curdle alongside the lukewarm gravy. Each clatter of plates, each hiss of the griddle, was a dull percussion in the symphony of her quiet despair. Her life was a repeating loop of early mornings, late nights, and the relentless, gnawing anxiety of bills that seemed to multiply faster than she could earn. Her uniform, a faded blue apron over a white shirt, felt less like work attire and more like a second skin, a uniform of invisible servitude in a city that saw her only as a nameless, faceless cog in its vast, uncaring machine. Nia was a woman crafted from resilient, hard-working fiber. Her hands, though calloused from years of carrying heavy trays, moved with a surprising grace. Her eyes, deep pools of weary wisdom, missed nothing, absorbing the nuances of every customer's story, the unspoken sorrows and transient joys that flickered across their faces. She was kind, instinctively so, but not naive. Life had long since stripped her of illusions, leaving her with a clear-eyed understanding of the world's harsh realities. Her biggest reality, her most pressing concern, was her grandmother, Mama Rose. Mama Rose was the last living link to a past filled with warmth and unconditional love. Now, frail and battling a chronic illness, she required constant, expensive medication and frequent visits from a home nurse. Nia's meager tips barely covered the rent, let alone the rising cost of her grandmother's care. Every shift was a desperate scramble to earn enough to simply stay afloat, to keep the wolf from the door. The weight of this responsibility pressed down on her, a physical ache in her chest that never truly subsided. The diner itself was a microcosm of her struggles, presided over by Mr. Henderson, the owner. Henderson was a man whose soul seemed to have been forged from hardened steel, his thin lips perpetually set in a grimace of thinly veiled contempt. He saw his employees not as people, but as disposable tools, easily replaced, always underperforming in his imagined metrics of efficiency and profit. He had a particular disdain for Nia, viewing her quiet dignity as a personal affront to his authority. He would snap orders, bark criticisms, his voice a low, grating whisper that carried the promise of dismissal. Nia, he'd hiss, his bald head gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Less chatting, more wiping. Sentiment doesn't sell pancakes, efficiency does. And remember, there are 10 other people waiting for your job. Don't think you're indispensable. His pronouncements were constant, suffocating reminders of her precarious position, the thin ice upon which her grandmother's very life precariously balanced. He rarely smiled, and when he did, it was a thin, humorless twist of his lips, a predatory gleam in his cold eyes. He embodied the systemic force that kept people like Nia trapped, working harder and harder for less and less, while he skimmed profits from their tireless labor. The patrons of Henderson's Diner were a cross-section of the city's weary working class, mixed with the occasional group of high schoolers trying to look cool and the rare, out-of-place elite, slumming it for a taste of authentic diner food. Nia had learned to anticipate their needs, to move with a quiet efficiency that masked the exhaustion in her bones. She would listen to their complaints about the city, about their jobs, about their lives, offering a sympathetic nod, a refilled coffee cup, a silent balm to their daily struggles. She saw the dignity in their weariness, the quiet resilience in their everyday battles. She understood them, for she was one of them. And then there were the outliers, the ones who didn't fit, the ones who were merely passing through, or, in the case of the man who stumbled in on a particularly brutal Tuesday night, the ones who were profoundly lost. The clock on the diner wall read 11:47 p.m. Rain lashed against the windows, a relentless, icy drumbeat against the glass, matching the drumming anxiety in Nia's heart. She was counting down the minutes until her shift ended, dreaming of a hot bath and a few hours of precious sleep before the cycle began anew. Only a few scattered customers remained, nursing cold coffee, lost in their own thoughts. The diner was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the clock. The bell above the door chimed, a sudden, jarring sound that made Nia flinch. A man stumbled in, dripping water onto the freshly mopped floor. He was clearly drunk, his expensive suit rumpled, his tie askew, his hair disheveled. He was tall, powerfully built, but his movements were uncoordinated, his balance precarious. He looked utterly out of place, a lost king in a kingdom of commoners. He swayed in the doorway, his eyes, bloodshot and unfocused, sweeping over the nearly empty diner, as if trying to comprehend his surroundings. He muttered something unintelligible, then stumbled toward a booth, collapsing into the worn vinyl with a heavy thud. It was Charles Sterling. Though Nia didn't know his name yet, she recognized the type. He was clearly a man of immense wealth, a man who belonged in glittering towers and exclusive clubs, not a rundown diner in the rain. His presence immediately drew the attention of Mr. Henderson, who had been lingering by the cash register, counting the night's meager earnings, his face a mask of bored contempt. Henderson's eyes, small and hard, immediately fixated on Sterling, not with concern, but with a palpable sense of annoyance and disdain. He saw not a man in distress, but a potential liability, a drunken nuisance who would complicate his closing procedures. He expected Nia to handle it, to remove the problem, to maintain the sterile efficiency he so prized. The sudden intrusion, the palpable air of chaos Sterling brought, was an affront to Henderson's meticulously ordered world, a world where everything, including human suffering, was meant to be controlled, categorized, and discreetly swept under the rug. Nia felt a familiar tightening in her stomach, a premonition of conflict. She knew what Henderson would demand. She also knew what her own heart demanded. The conflict was about to begin, not between her and the drunk man, but between her quiet empathy and the cold, unyielding dictates of her callous boss. The stage was set. The rain continued to fall, washing over the grimy windows, a silent witness to the escalating drama, to the quiet woman who was about to defy an order, to follow her heart, and to unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would shatter the very foundations of her life and of a powerful man's perception of the world. Mr. Henderson's face, already a roadmap of discontent, contorted into a mask of pure exasperation as Charles Sterling slumped deeper into the booth, his head lolling against the grimy vinyl. "Nia," Henderson hissed, his voice a low, dangerous growl that cut through the quiet hum of the diner. "Get him out of here. Now, we're closing. I don't need some drunk passing out in my booth. He'll scare off the few decent customers we have left, and he'll probably leave a mess. This isn't a flop house." His words were laced with a venomous disdain, not just for Sterling, but for Nia, for the very idea that she might hesitate, that she might feel an ounce of human compassion for a stranger who offered no immediate financial gain. Nia looked from Henderson's snarling face to Sterling, who was now muttering incoherently, his eyes half closed, a faint tremor running through his body. He was clearly more than just drunk. He was disoriented, vulnerable. A cold chill, unrelated to the dampness of the night, ran down Nia's spine. She'd seen this before. People who were simply drunk usually knew where they were. This man seemed utterly lost, disconnected from reality. He was not merely a nuisance. He was in distress. Her empathy, a deeply ingrained part of her nature, immediately flared, overriding her fear of Henderson. Her mind flashed to Mama Rose, to the countless times Mama Rose had offered a helping hand to those less fortunate, had extended a kindness without question, purely out of the goodness of her heart. "Mr. Henderson," Nia began, her voice soft but firm, a quiet challenge to his callous command. "He's not just drunk. He looks disoriented. He might be sick. We can't just throw him out into the rain." Henderson's eyes, small and hard, narrowed to angry slits. He stomped over to the booth, his balding head gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "I said get him out. Are you deaf, girl? I don't pay you to make moral judgments." I pay you to serve food and clear tables. This is my establishment, and my rules are final. If he's still here in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. And if you're still here helping him, you can consider yourself unemployed. Do you understand? The threat was stark, unambiguous. Her job, her only source of income, the thin thread keeping Mama Rose's medication funded, was hanging by a single, desperate moment. The few remaining customers looked up, their faces a mixture of discomfort and morbid curiosity, their gazes fixed on the escalating confrontation. They were silent witnesses, unwilling to intervene, their own fear of Henderson a palpable presence in the room. Nia felt a familiar wave of despair, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She pictured the stack of unpaid bills on her kitchen table, the weary resignation in Mama Rose's eyes. This was the sensible choice, the safe choice, to leave the drunk man to his fate, to protect her own precarious livelihood. But as she looked at Sterling's vacant, disoriented face, at the faint tremor running through his slumped frame, another image flickered in her mind. Mama Rose, her voice gentle, saying, "You always help those who can't help themselves, Nia, no matter the cost." And in that moment, the choice became clear. It wasn't a choice between right and wrong. It was a choice between survival and humanity. And Nia, with a quiet, unshakable resolve, chose humanity. She pushed past Henderson, ignoring his furious sputter, and knelt beside the unconscious man. She gently shook his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me? Where do you live? Is there someone I can call for you?" Sterling stirred, his eyes fluttering open for a moment, unfocused and distant. He mumbled something, a slurred jumble of words. Nia leaned closer, straining to hear. It sounded like S. Sterling. "Manor, West Oak Drive." He passed out again, his head lolling to the side. Nia looked up at Henderson, who was standing over her, his face purpling with rage. "I'm taking him home, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice quiet but firm, devoid of any fear. He said Sterling Manor, West Oak Drive. Henderson let out a short, derisive bark of laughter. "Sterling Manor? Are you insane, girl? That's where Charles Sterling lives, the billionaire. He's probably just some derelict who heard the name and want a free ride. Don't tell me you're falling for that old trick. I will call the police, Nia. And you are fired. Effective immediately. Get out of my diner." The word "fired" hung in the air, a death knell to Nia's fragile hopes. But she didn't flinch. She had made her choice. She found a man's wallet, surprisingly thick, in his inner jacket pocket. She pulled out a driver's license. Charles Sterling. And the address matched. Sterling Manor, West Oak Drive. He was indeed the billionaire. The realization sent a fresh wave of shock through Nia, a disorienting twist to an already surreal situation. This wasn't just a random drunk. This was one of the most powerful men in the city, a man whose name was synonymous with unimaginable wealth and influence. And he was completely helpless, vulnerable, at her mercy. She looked at his face, at the raw, disoriented humanity stripped bare by alcohol, and she felt no awe, no resentment, only a profound sense of responsibility. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she hoisted the heavy, unconscious man onto her shoulder, half carrying, half dragging him out of the booth. He was heavy, surprisingly so, his inert weight a dead burden against her aching body. Henderson watched, his mouth agape, utterly speechless, his fury momentarily eclipsed by sheer bewilderment. Nia maneuvered Sterling's limp form through the diner, past the few gaping customers, and out into the relentless, unforgiving rain. The cold night air hit her face, a chilling reminder of the precariousness of her situation, of the enormity of the decision she had just made. She was unemployed. She had no way to pay for Mama Rose's medication. She had just lost everything for a stranger. But as she struggled to get the heavy man in her battered, old car, his dead weight a testament to her profound, desperate kindness, she felt a strange, quiet sense of peace. She had chosen. She had chosen human decency over cold calculation. She had chosen Mama Rose's lessons over Mr. Henderson's threats. And for that, in the howling rain, With her job lost and her future uncertain, she knew, with an unshakable certainty, that she had chosen correctly. The night was only just beginning, and the world was about to change. The drive to Sterling Manor was a surreal odyssey through the rain-slicked streets of a city Nia rarely glimpsed, a world of glittering lights and manicured lawns that felt a million miles away from her own cramped apartment and the oppressive gloom of Henderson's diner. Charles Sterling, a man whose name was synonymous with power and wealth, was a dead weight in her passenger seat, his labored breathing the only sound apart from the rhythmic swish of her windshield wipers. The expensive leather of his rumpled suit brushed against the worn fabric of her car's seats, a stark juxtaposition of two vastly different realities. Nia navigated the unfamiliar, winding roads of the exclusive West Oak Drive, her old car's headlights cutting through the sheets of rain, revealing glimpses of opulent mansions hidden behind towering gates and dense, perfectly sculpted hedges. Each turn brought her deeper into a world of unimaginable privilege, a world that felt both alien and unsettling. She felt a strange mix of emotions, a nagging worry about Mama Rose's next prescription, a quiet defiance born from her confrontation with Henderson, and a persistent unease about the sheer improbability of her current situation. She, Nia, the invisible waitress, was currently playing chauffeur to a billionaire who didn't even know her name. Finally, through a parting in the dense trees, she saw it. Sterling Manor. It wasn't just a house. It was an estate, a sprawling edifice of glass and steel and imported stone, illuminated by a discreet, golden glow that seemed to emanate from its very foundations. It looked like something out of a magazine, a monument to unimaginable wealth, completely detached from the struggles of the city that sprawled below it. A massive wrought iron gate, adorned with an ornate, gilded S, blocked the driveway. Nia pulled her car to a stop, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm on her roof. She stared at the imposing gate, wondering what to do. There was no buzzer, no intercom visible from her vantage point. As she hesitated, a security camera, almost imperceptible in the darkness, swiveled slowly, its red eye glinting, clearly having detected her presence. A moment later, with a low, hydraulic hiss, the massive gates began to swing open, revealing a long, winding driveway that disappeared into a tunnel of manicured trees. Nia swallowed hard. She was entering a world she knew nothing about, a world that had the power to swallow her whole. She drove slowly up the long, winding driveway, the crunch of her tires on the pristine gravel sounding unnaturally loud in the silent, rain-soaked night. The house loomed larger and larger, its sheer scale overwhelming. She pulled up to the main entrance, a grand, pillared portico that felt more like a public monument than a private home. The sheer opulence was dizzying. As she cut her engine, the silence was profound, broken only by the steady patter of rain and the distant, muffled sound of Sterling's heavy breathing. She looked at his inert form, his face slack in sleep, and felt a strange flicker of pity. For all his wealth, his power, his endless resources, he was utterly helpless, vulnerable, exposed. He was just a man. She gently shook his shoulder. "Mr. Sterling? We're here. You're home." He stirred, groaning softly, his eyes fluttering open. He looked around, his gaze slowly taking in the familiar grandeur of his own mansion, then focusing, with a flicker of confusion, on Nia. "Wah," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep and alcohol. "I took you home, Mr. Sterling," Nia said, her voice quiet. "You were at the diner. Henderson's diner." His eyes, though still bloodshot and unfocused, held a brief moment of dawning recognition. The diner. Henderson's. He tried to sit up, groaning as a wave of dizziness hit him. He pressed a hand to his temple, his face a mask of pain. "My head. I can help you inside," Nia offered, her voice still gentle. He looked at her then, truly looked at her, his eyes trying to pierce through the fog of his intoxication. He saw her uniform, the faint scent of coffee and grease clinging to her. He saw the genuine concern in her eyes. He was a man who rarely encountered such unadulterated kindness, especially when he was at his most vulnerable. "No, thank you," he mumbled, try to wave her away. I'm fine. I'll manage. He fumbled for his seatbelt, his movements clumsy. Just thank you for this. He reached into his rumpled jacket pocket, his movements slow, and pulled out a thick wad of bills. He tried to press them into her hand. Here, for your trouble. Keep the change. Nia looked at the money, a thick stack of hundreds. It was more than she made in a month, more than she could ever dream of getting for a single night's work. It would pay for Mama Rose's medication for months, for the rent, for the eviction notice that would surely come from Henderson. Her fingers ached to take it, to seize the lifeline that was being offered to her. But something, a quiet, stubborn voice inside her, refused. She was not a mercenary. She had not done this for money. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. She gently pushed his hand away. No, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice firm. I don't want your money. I did it because you needed help. That's all. Sterling stared at her, genuinely surprised. He was a man who understood the language of transactions, of quid pro quo, of every kindness having a price. Her refusal, so quiet and resolute, was an anomaly, a challenge to his entire worldview. He looked at her for a long moment, a flicker of something new, curiosity, perhaps, or a nascent respect in his bloodshot eyes. He then nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Very well, he said, his voice raspy. He struggled out of the car, his movements unsteady, clinging to the open door for support. Thank you for everything. He mumbled a few more incoherent words, then stumbled toward the massive front door, fumbling with a keycard. He disappeared inside, leaving Nia alone in the vast, silent grandeur of Sterling Manor's driveway, the rain still falling, the powerful engine of his private world humming softly behind the imposing walls. Nia sat in her car for a long moment, the silence of the night heavy around her. She looked at the empty passenger seat, then at her own hands on the steering wheel. She had just lost her job. She had no money, no immediate prospects, and the relentless weight of Mama Rose's needs pressed down on her. She had defied her boss, risked everything, and walked away from fortune. Had she been a fool? A deep, wrenching despair began to settle over her. She turned the key in the ignition, the old engine sputtering to life, a familiar, comforting sound in the overwhelming silence. She drove slowly back down the long driveway, through the massive gates that hissed shut behind her, returning to her own stark reality. The rain was still falling. Her future was uncertain, but as she drove, something subtle, almost imperceptible, had shifted within her. She was broke. She was unemployed, but she had kept her humanity intact. She had acted with integrity, with compassion, simply because it was right. And in the vast, dark emptiness of the night, that fragile, quiet knowledge was a small, defiant flicker of warmth, a testament to a soul that refused to be extinguished. The consequences of her actions were yet to fully unfold, and the universe, in its own mysterious way, was about to begin paying her back in ways she could never possibly imagine. The powerful man she had saved, whose world she had briefly entered, was now sober, and he would not forget. The following morning, the stark reality of Nia's decision hit her with the force of a physical blow. The eviction notice for her meager apartment had already been slipped under her door, its official language a cold, brutal reminder of her precarious existence. Mama Rose, weakened by her illness, lay listlessly in bed, her breathing shallow, the clock ticking relentlessly towards the next dose of expensive medication Nia couldn't afford. Mr. Henderson, true to his word, had locked her out of her shift, his curt text message confirming her immediate termination, as per our conversation. Your services are no longer required. Do not show up for work. Nia stared at the phone, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. She had acted with integrity, with compassion, and for it, she had lost everything. The despair was immense, a suffocating blanket that threatened to drown her. She called every diner, every restaurant in her small section of the city, her voice a strained whisper, but every call was met with polite rejections. No experience, not hiring, we're looking for someone with a different energy. She was branded, not just by Henderson's petty vindictiveness, but by the quiet, pervasive prejudice against someone like her, a woman from the wrong side of town, with a wrong address, without the right connections. She was invisible to the systems that could help her, and all too visible to the ones that could crush her. Days bled into a blurry, agonizing week. Nia scraped together enough money for Mama Rose's immediate medication, selling off her few meager possessions, her mother's old jewelry, a cherished antique lamp. The shame of it was a bitter taste in her mouth. She felt a profound sense of failure, a crushing weight of responsibility she could no longer bear. She was losing the fight for her grandmother, losing the fight for her own dignity, losing the fight against a system that seemed designed to keep her down. She reflected on her decision to help Charles Sterling. Was it worth it? Had she been a fool to refuse his money, to risk everything for a man who was probably already back in his gilded cage, oblivious to her suffering? The resentment began to fester, a dark, insidious poison in her heart. He was a billionaire, a man who could have solved all her problems with a single flick of his wrist, and she had refused his help, adhering to a code of ethics that now seemed naive, even foolish, in the face of her imminent ruin. Meanwhile, in the polished, silent grandeur of Sterling Manor, Charles Sterling was undergoing his own quiet transformation. The hangover from his drunken escapade was brutal, a physical torment that matched the slow, dawning shame of his behavior. His personal assistant, a meticulous, unflappable woman named Eleanor, had pieced together the fragments of his memory. A random detour to a rundown diner, a rude manager, and a quiet, unassuming waitress who had, inexplicably, shown him a kindness he rarely encountered. Sterling, a man accustomed to having his every whim instantly satisfied, felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring within him. Genuine curiosity. Who was this woman who had refused his money? Who was this person who had seen his weakness and responded with compassion, not contempt? He dispatched Eleanor to find her. "Find a waitress from Henderson's diner," he commanded, his voice still a little hoarse from the hangover. "The one who drove me home. Get her name. Find out everything about her." Eleanor, efficient as ever, began her discreet investigation. But even for a man of Sterling's immense power, finding Nia was surprisingly difficult. She lived in the shadows, outside the usual networks of influence and information. Her life was not digital, not publicly visible. She had no online footprint, no extensive credit history that could be easily accessed. Eleanor encountered bureaucratic walls, dismissive clerks, anonymous apartment managers who were reluctant to provide information. It was as if Nia, and people like her, simply didn't exist in the systems that governed Sterling's world. This difficulty, this unexpected challenge, intrigued Sterling even more. He was a man who reveled in overcoming obstacles, in solving complex puzzles. The more elusive Nia became, the more determined he was to find her. He began to learn, through Eleanor's persistent digging, about the grim realities of Nia's life. Her precarious financial situation, her ailing grandmother, the constant struggle to make ends meet. He learned about Henderson's reputation, his casual cruelty, his dismissal of the very kindness Nia embodied. He even heard whispers of Henderson firing Nia, just days after Sterling's drunken night, confirming the callousness he had dimly perceived in his stupor. The more he learned, the deeper the knot of shame in his own stomach tightened. He, Charles Sterling, the billionaire, had been so insulated by his wealth, so consumed by his own self-importance, that he had become blind to the struggles of ordinary people, had taken their quiet dignity for granted. The quiet waitress, the one he had tried to pay off, had, in her simple act of refusal, exposed the profound emptiness of his own existence. He started to see the world differently, to notice the invisible labor, the quiet acts of resilience, the pervasive injustice that thrived just beyond the gilded cage of his privilege. The search for Nia was no longer just about curiosity or gratitude. It was about a profound, almost spiritual reckoning. He needed to find her not just to repay a debt, but to understand the fundamental humanity she had so effortlessly displayed. He began to formulate a plan, a way to not just thank her, but to fundamentally alter the course of her life, and perhaps his own. He also knew that this grand gesture had to be public, undeniable, a powerful statement that would expose the very forces that had tried to crush her. He had to make an example, not just of his gratitude, but of the systemic cruelty she had faced. The stage was being set for a grand, dramatic confrontation, one that would redefine power, justice, and the true meaning of wealth. The city's annual Pillars of Industry Gala was a spectacle of opulence, a glittering, exclusive event where the city's elite gathered to celebrate their own influence and wealth. Held in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, it was a night of champagne toasts, hushed power deals, and the soft clinking of expensive silverware against bone china. Mr. Henderson, the owner of Henderson's Diner, was a rare and unlikely guest, his presence a testament to Mayor Thompson's new community outreach initiative, a thinly veiled attempt to project an image of inclusivity. Henderson, dressed in an ill-fitting rented tuxedo, beamed, basking in the unexpected glow of recognition, convinced he was on the cusp of a promotion within the mayor's new Small Business Council. He hoped to use his platform to further his own financial ambitions, to secure grants, to expand his empire of mediocre diners. He caught Mayor Thompson's eye, and the mayor offered a brief, dismissive nod, a subtle confirmation of Henderson's insignificant status in the grand scheme of things. Yet, for Henderson, this was his moment of triumph, a reward for his relentless pursuit of profit and his unwavering loyalty to the city's power brokers. Charles Sterling, the billionaire, was the undisputed star of the evening. He stood on a raised dais at the front of the ballroom, surrounded by his inner circle, his presence radiating an almost palpable aura of power and wealth. His speech, scheduled for later in the evening, was the main event, a highly anticipated announcement of a major new philanthropic initiative, rumored to be a vast sum dedicated to urban renewal and community development. The anticipation in the room was electric. The city's power players, the politicians, the developers, the corporate magnates, all jostled for position, eager to bask in Sterling's reflected glory to secure a piece of his vast fortune. They knew Sterling was about to make a monumental announcement, one that would redefine the city's future, and they wanted to be seen as being on the right side of his immense generosity. In a small, dimly lit room adjacent to the ballroom, Nia sat alone, her heart hammering against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She was dressed in a simple, elegant black dress, borrowed from Mama Rose's old church wardrobe, a garment that felt both foreign and oddly empowering. She had been brought here mysteriously by Eleanor, Sterling's assistant, just an hour before the gala began. Eleanor, her face impassive, had simply stated, "Mr. Sterling requires your presence. He will explain everything." Nia had no idea why she was there, why a billionaire would send his private assistant to retrieve a recently fired diner waitress. Her mind reeled with 1,000 questions, 1,000 possibilities, but the most dominant one was a profound sense of apprehension. Was this some kind of trap? A delayed retribution for refusing his money? Was he going to humiliate her further? A private mockery before his elite friends? The mystery surrounding her invitation had been carefully cultivated, adding a layer of suspense that tightened Nia's nerves. She had considered refusing, retreating back into the safety of her anonymity, but the image of Mama Rose's frail face, the gnawing anxiety of their imminent eviction, spurred her on. She had nothing left to lose, and somewhere, deep within her, a faint ember of curiosity, a flicker of defiant hope, refused to be extinguished. She was an underdog, thrust into an extraordinary situation, and she felt the weight of it all, the immense, terrifying stakes of the unknown. Her presence in this opulent hotel, so far removed from the harsh realities of her life, felt utterly surreal, as if she had stepped into a dream from which she expected to violently awaken. The soft hum of conversation from the ballroom, the muffled clinking of glasses, the distant laughter, it all served to amplify her isolation, her sense of being a fish out of water, a quiet, ordinary woman thrust onto a stage she had no business being on. She heard the moderator's voice from the ballroom, amplified by the sound system. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. It is my distinct honor to introduce a man who needs no introduction. A true titan of industry, a visionary, a philanthropist who has shaped the very destiny of our city. Please welcome Mr. Charles Sterling. A thunderous applause erupted, a wave of sound that vibrated through the floor. Nia's heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat in her ears. This was it, the public announcement, the climax. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing herself for whatever was to come. She felt a profound sense of foreboding, a deep certainty that her life and the lives of those she cared about were about to be irrevocably changed for better or worse by the words that were about to be spoken by the most powerful man in the city. The elegant, polished setting of the gala was about to be shattered, exposing the raw, uncomfortable truths that lay beneath its glittering facade. The thunderous applause for Charles Sterling slowly subsided, leaving a charged silence in the grand ballroom. Sterling walked to the podium, his posture straight, his presence commanding. He looked out at the glittering crowd, his eyes, usually cold and calculating, now holding a strange, unreadable depth. Mr. Henderson, perched on the edge of his seat, beamed, convinced he was about to hear a public endorsement of his own small business acumen, a direct path to the mayor's council. He was oblivious to the true nature of the storm about to break. Sterling began to speak, his voice calm, resonant, filling the enormous space. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you tonight to announce a new initiative, one that I believe will truly redefine what it means to be a pillar of this community. For too long, I, and perhaps many of us, have lived in a world detached from the very city we claim to serve. We have seen statistics, but we have failed to see the stories. We have invested in projects, but we have failed to invest in people. His words, initially, were the usual platitudes of a philanthropist designed to generate goodwill. The crowd murmured approvingly. Henderson nodded vigorously. But then, Sterling's tone shifted. A subtle, almost imperceptible hardening, an edge of steel entering his voice. Recently, he continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, I found myself in a situation of profound vulnerability. I was disoriented, unwell, lost. And in that moment, I encountered someone who chose, purely out of compassion, to help me. Someone who saw not a problem, but a person in distress. Someone who extended kindness when it was least expected and refused payment when it was offered. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a silent challenge to the transactional nature of the room. A ripple of confusion went through the audience. This wasn't the usual script. Henderson frowned, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Sterling then turned his gaze, sharp and unwavering, directly toward Mr. Henderson. That person, Sterling stated, his voice now ringing with a quiet, powerful indictment, was a waitress from a diner on the other side of town. Henderson's diner. Henderson's face went pale. He seemed to shrink in his seat, all his self-satisfaction draining away, replaced by a dawning, horrified realization. The name of his diner, spoken by Charles Sterling, the billionaire, was not a promotion. It was a curse. This particular waitress, Sterling continued, his voice gaining momentum, each word a hammer blow, was a woman of immense integrity. She defied the direct orders of her manager, a man whose sole concern was profit and whose compassion was clearly absent, to ensure my safety. She walked me through the rain. She drove me home. She refused any compensation for her selfless act. He took a deep breath, and his voice boomed, filling the ballroom with a devastating clarity. And for that act of profound human decency, her manager, Mr. Henderson, fired her. He fired her for being a good human being. He fired her for having a heart. He fired her for choosing compassion over corporate efficiency. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. The polite murmurs turned into a roar of shock and indignation. All eyes were now on Henderson, who sat frozen in his seat, his face a grotesque mask of shame and terror. His moment of triumph had become a public execution. Sterling then turned his gaze away from Henderson, and his eyes, filled with a profound gratitude, fixed on the discreet side door leading to the adjacent room. I asked this woman why she helped me. She told me she did it because it was the right thing to do. She told me she learned it from her grandmother. And in that simple act of kindness, she taught me more about humanity, about true wealth, about what truly matters, than all my years in boardrooms and all my millions of dollars ever could. He then gestured towards the side door. I would like to introduce you to the true pillar of this community, the woman who taught me what it means to be truly rich. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nia Johnson. The side door opened, and Nia walked out onto the dais, into the blinding glare of the spotlights, into the stunned, silent gaze of the city's elite. She wore her simple black dress, her posture straight, her face a mask of quiet dignity, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and overwhelming disbelief. She had been plucked from the shadows, from the very edges of society, and placed at the absolute center of power, a living testament to the profound irony of the moment. Charles Sterling walked to her, a genuine smile transforming his usually stern face. He took her hand, his gesture one of profound respect and deep, undeniable gratitude. He then turned back to the microphone, his voice ringing with a powerful, transformative announcement. "I'm establishing the Johnson Compassion Initiative," he declared, his voice filled with a new, powerful purpose. A multi-million-dollar foundation dedicated to supporting vulnerable families, providing access to health care, education, and safe housing. And the first and only CEO and president of this foundation will be Ms. Nia Johnson. She will decide where every single dollar goes. She will redefine what it means to build a better city, because she has already shown us, through her actions, the true blueprint for humanity. The ballroom erupted, not in polite applause, but in a thunderous, roaring standing ovation, a wave of sound that was not just appreciation, but a catharsis, a collective acknowledgement of a truth that had been spoken, a wrong that had been righted. Mr. Henderson sat frozen, his world collapsing around him, his carefully constructed career shattered by the powerful, undeniable force of Nia's quiet kindness. The underdog had not just won. She had taken the stage, and in doing so, had redefined power, justice, and the very soul of the city. The standing ovation for Nia was deafening, a roaring wave of sound that washed over the ballroom, a collective outpouring of awe, respect, and a profound, dawning understanding. For the first time, the city's elite, accustomed to the glittering facade of their own privilege, were confronted with the raw, undeniable truth of the human spirit, embodied in the quiet dignity of a former diner waitress. Nia stood beside Charles Sterling, her hand clasped firmly in his, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a profound, overwhelming gratitude. She looked out at the sea of faces and saw not judgment, but admiration, even a hint of shame. She saw Mr. Henderson, his face a grotesque mask of terror and humiliation, his body slumped in his seat, his once smug expression replaced by utter defeat. She saw Mayor Thompson, looking pale and deeply uncomfortable, realizing that his political future was now precariously balanced. Charles Sterling, a man who had long been defined by his immense wealth, found a new, more profound purpose in his life. He was no longer just a billionaire. He was an advocate, a force for change, his vast fortune now a tool for justice and compassion. The Johnson Compassion Initiative, launched with an initial endowment of hundreds of millions of dollars, was not just a foundation. It was a revolution, a direct challenge to the systemic inequities that had plagued the city for decades. Its mission, guided by Nia's unwavering moral compass and her deep, lived understanding of the struggles of the city's most vulnerable, was to provide immediate relief and long-term solutions for families facing poverty, homelessness, and inadequate health care. Nia, as its CEO, embraced her new role with a quiet, fierce determination. She used her platform not for personal gain, but to amplify the voices of the unheard, to give hope to the forgotten. She established programs for affordable housing, created mobile clinics for the uninsured, and launched educational initiatives that provided scholarships and mentorship for underprivileged youth. Her work was transformative, not just providing aid, but empowering communities, helping them build sustainable futures. Mr. Henderson's downfall was swift and absolute. The public humiliation at the gala was only the beginning. His callous treatment of Nia, broadcast to the entire city, triggered a wave of outrage that cascaded through the media. His diner faced boycotts, his reputation was in tatters, and Mayor Thompson, eager to distance himself from the scandal, publicly condemned his actions. Investigations into his business practices, long rumored to be shady, were fast-tracked. He lost his diner, his licenses were revoked, and he faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of greed and inhumanity, his petty tyranny finally yielding its bitter harvest. Mama Rose, surrounded by the warmth of her granddaughter's newfound security and the best medical care available, slowly began to regain some of her strength. Nia moved her into a beautiful, sun-filled apartment, where she was cared for by a dedicated team of nurses, her final years filled with comfort and peace. Mama Rose would sit in her armchair, her eyes closed, listening to Nia talk about the foundation, about the lives they were changing, a faint, contented smile on her lips. "I told you, child," she would whisper, her voice frail but clear. Kindness always finds its way back home. The city, in the wake of the scandal, underwent a profound, necessary reckoning. The public exposure of corruption led to widespread reforms within the police department and the mayor's office. A new era of transparency and accountability began, a testament to the power of ordinary citizens to demand justice. The divide between the city's wealthy elite and its struggling communities began to slowly, painstakingly, narrow, replaced by a nascent understanding that true prosperity was not just about profit, but about shared well-being. Nia never forgot her roots. She remained grounded, her spirit untouched by the vast wealth and influence she now wielded. She often visited her old neighborhood, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a friend, a neighbor, a reminder that empathy, integrity, and a willingness to help a stranger in the rain were the true foundations of a life well lived. The very diner where she had been fired, now under new, compassionate ownership, became a regular stop for her, a place where she could sit in her old booth, drink a simple cup of coffee, and reflect on the extraordinary journey her life had taken. The memory of the rain, of the drunk billionaire, of the callous boss, no longer brought despair. It brought a profound sense of gratitude, a quiet understanding that even in the darkest moments, the seeds of hope and transformation were silently being sown. The legacy of Nia Johnson, the black waitress who dared to show kindness to a stranger, resonated far beyond the confines of her city. The Johnson Compassion Initiative, under her visionary leadership, grew into a national force for social good, its name synonymous with transformative change and unwavering empathy. Nia became a prominent figure in the philanthropic world, her voice, once silenced by systemic indifference, now commanding attention on national and international stages. She spoke not of statistics, but of stories, the stories of resilience she had witnessed, the dignity she had fought to preserve, the profound impact of a single act of kindness. Her life became a testament to the power of authentic leadership, proving that true influence comes not from pedigree or privilege, but from a heart committed to justice and a spirit rooted in compassion. Charles Sterling, forever changed by Nia's unexpected intervention, dedicated the rest of his life to supporting the foundation, becoming its most passionate advocate and a tireless partner in its mission. He used his immense network, his business acumen, and his formidable influence to expand the foundation's reach, to challenge entrenched systems of inequality, and to inspire other philanthropists to move beyond superficial charity towards genuine, transformative social impact. His mother, Mama Eleanor, lived out her remaining years in peace and comfort, her final days filled with the warmth of her son's rediscovered love and the gentle presence of Nia, who continued to visit her, singing the old lullabies that at first brought them together. The profound transformation of Oakwood Senior Care, now fully integrated into the Johnson Compassion Initiative, served as a living model for humane elder care, a beacon of dignity and respect in a system that had long prioritized profit over people. Mr. Henderson, his name a byword for corporate cruelty, vanished from public life, his diner replaced by a community center that offered job training and support for struggling families. A bitter irony that spoke volumes about the reversal of fortunes. His downfall was a powerful reminder that even the smallest acts of oppression, when exposed to the light of truth, can lead to devastating consequences for those who wield them. The city itself, once plagued by corruption and division, slowly but surely began to heal. The reforms initiated by the new leadership, spurred by Nia's tireless advocacy, fostered a new era of transparency, accountability, and genuine community engagement. The vibrant neighborhoods that had once been targeted for gentrification were revitalized through community-led initiatives, their unique cultures preserved and celebrated. Nia's journey became a powerful narrative of collective redemption, a testament to the idea that a single act of courage can spark a revolution, transforming not just individual lives, but the very fabric of a society. One sunny afternoon, years later, Nia stood on the grand stage of a national philanthropic conference, addressing an audience of thousands. Her voice, clear and resonant, filled the immense hall, not with the strained whisper of a tired waitress, but with the unwavering conviction of a woman who had found her purpose. She spoke of Mama Rose, of the lessons learned in a humble diner, of the unexpected journey that had led her to this moment. She spoke of Charles Sterling, the man who had been lost, and the profound transformation that kindness had wrought in his heart. She spoke of the struggles, the despair, the moments when hope had seemed an impossible dream. "I stand before you today," she concluded, her eyes shining with a quiet, powerful grace, "not as a CEO, not as a philanthropist, but as a witness to the extraordinary power of ordinary human kindness. A witness to the fact that empathy is not a weakness, but the greatest strength we possess. And a witness to the truth that when we choose compassion over convenience, when we choose humanity over profit, we do not just change lives. We change the world." Her words were met with a thunderous standing ovation, a roar of validation that echoed through the hall, a testament to the profound impact of her story. Nia, the black waitress from Henderson's diner, had not just helped a drunk billionaire get home. She had become the conscience of a city, the architect of a new era of compassion, and a living testament to the fact that the most valuable treasure is not found in bank accounts, but in the unwavering, transformative power of a truly kind heart. Her legacy was not measured in dollars, but in the countless lives she had touched, the communities she had uplifted, and the enduring hope she had ignited in the hearts of millions. The story of Nia Johnson became more than just a tale of triumph. It became a guiding principle, a testament to the transformative power of a single, compassionate act. The Johnson Compassion Initiative, now a global entity, continued to grow, fueled by Nia's unwavering dedication and Charles Sterling's tireless support. Their partnership, an unlikely alliance between a woman who embodied quiet empathy and a man who had once been consumed by ruthless ambition, redefined what true leadership meant. Their joint efforts led to systemic changes in legislation, fostering a new era of corporate social responsibility and ethical urban development that prioritized human dignity over unchecked profit. Nia, often invited to speak at prestigious universities and international forums, always began her addresses by recounting her humble beginnings at Henderson's diner. She never shied away from the painful details of her struggle, the systemic indifference, or the raw humiliation she had endured. Her vulnerability was her strength, her lived experience a powerful tool for advocacy. She inspired countless individuals to look beyond superficial appearances, to challenge unjust systems, and to find their own unique ways to contribute to a more equitable world. Her message was simple yet profound, that true wealth lies not in accumulation, but in distribution, and that the greatest legacy one can leave is the betterment of human lives. Mama Rose lived to see Nia become a national figure, her eyes shining with a fierce, quiet pride. In her final years, surrounded by the love and care Nia had provided, Mama Rose would often listen to Nia recount the stories of families helped, communities revitalized, and lives transformed by the foundation. "You made it right, baby girl," she'd whisper, her voice thin but clear. "You made it all right." Her peaceful passing was not a moment of sorrow, but a gentle culmination, a quiet benediction on a life well lived and a legacy beautifully fulfilled. The old diner, the very place where Nia's transformation had begun, became a symbolic landmark in the city. The new owners, inspired by Nia's story, renamed it the Compassion Kitchen, transforming it into a community-focused eatery that also served as a training ground for aspiring entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Nia would occasionally visit, sitting in her old booth, drinking a cup of coffee, and observing the new generation of servers. Her presence a silent, inspiring reminder of the profound journeys that could begin in the most ordinary of places. She found a quiet satisfaction in seeing the cycles broken, the old patterns of oppression replaced by new avenues of opportunity. The city itself, once scarred by its past, had embarked on a journey of profound healing. Public spaces that had once been neglected were transformed into vibrant community hubs. Schools in underprivileged neighborhoods received unprecedented funding. The police department, under its new, ethical leadership, engaged in genuine community partnerships, fostering trust and rebuilding relationships that had been shattered for decades. The story of Nia Johnson was woven into the fabric of the city, taught in schools, celebrated in public art. It was a reminder that true power resided not in the hands of the elite, but in the hearts of ordinary people who chose to act with courage and compassion. One chilly morning, years after the gala, Nia stood on the steps of what was once Sterling Manor, now a thriving community center dedicated to leadership development and social innovation. Charles Sterling, his silver hair catching the morning sun, stood beside her, his face etched with a profound sense of peace. "You know, Nia," he said, a gentle smile on his face, "I often wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stumbled into that diner that night." Nia looked out at the bustling activity of the center, at the faces of the young people, filled with hope and purpose. She thought of the rain, of the cold, of the despair that had almost consumed her. "Sometimes, Charles," she replied, her voice soft but filled with profound wisdom, "the greatest blessings come disguised as our deepest challenges. And sometimes it just takes one moment of unexpected kindness to change everything." Her words, simple and true, hung in the air, a perfect, beautiful melody, a testament to a life that had been defined not by what she had lost, but by what she had given. The narrator's voice comes in, full of warmth and a final, uplifting message. So, dear friend, the next time you face a moment of choice, a moment where kindness seems costly or where doing the right thing feels impossible, remember the story of Nia Johnson. Remember the quiet waitress who dared to help a stranger, who defied a cruel boss, and who, against all odds, transformed her own fate and the destiny of an entire city. Her story is a powerful reminder that every act of compassion, no matter how small, sends ripples into the universe. It teaches us that integrity is the most valuable currency, that empathy is the most potent force, and that the quiet, unwavering power of a human heart, committed to doing what is right, is capable of generating the most extraordinary, life-altering, and profoundly beautiful returns.